Hello, Old School RuneScape. Welcome to this week's live stream. I'm delighted to be joined by Mod Mike D.
Howdy.
And Mod Kieren.
Hello, hello.
Right, so we've got Mod Spear behind the scenes as usual, making all the magic happen. And Mod Acorn is working on the chat. So at Old School RS, should you have any questions you'd like to ask us, she'll take your questions, relay them to us, and just be a real kind soul in the chat. And engage with you all. Right. Let's cover some announcements first of all before we get started. Today, about an hour and a half ago-ish, we published the July edition of the Gillenor Gazette. !Gazette to get the link to read it. That's 1Z and 2 T's, or 1Z and 2 T's, depending on where you're from. We cover a lot in the blog. It's a big one. I recommend reading it. I made some bullet points of like key stuff. So we're using it to... It's like the inaugural version in which there will be a new monthly article and live stream featuring Old School's leadership team, which is kind of what this is. This is because we want to increase the transparency and forge better relationships with you going forward. What else? So we've been closely examining the roadmap for the second half of the year when we're making changes. We're going to get into that a bit later on. But the key stuff you need to know is that Kingdom Divided will be pushed to early 2021. So will Clans and Group Ironman, but they're going to remain in development. We're still working on them. We'll be replacing those updates with smaller and medium-sized content, which we'll talk about soon. We also introduce you to 2 new content devs and a brand new engine dev. So that takes us to 6 developer hires during lockdown. We've also confirmed the hiring of a new community manager and a new artist we'll be introducing you to soon. So big growth for the Old School team. Boss Slayer Master has been shelved in light of player feedback. We are going to revisit it at a later date and redesign the content back to the drawing board. We're going to look to replace it with some other skilling content we've been planning later on and bring that forward. We'll share more in the coming weeks. We've confirmed that any Bounty Hunter and Rev Cave changes will be coming on the 6th of August. There is a very, very thorough proposal from Modash for a costume room rework, which we hope to pull really soon.
Which is sick.
It does look amazing. And we explore a lot of the team's ideas from Ideation Days. Ideation Days, again, we'll talk about a little bit later on in the stream. It's just time allocated for us to design and prototype content we'd like to see in the game. Announcement-wise, I've covered Boss Slayer, but !Boss Slayer. So, last week we published a blog which proposed the addition of the new Slayer Master, a new task structure, new rewards, and so on. We got a ton of feedback. Ultimately, we've decided not to pull it in its current form. There's an announcement at the top of the blog, in the edit log, plus in the Gazette as well. So let's get into the introductions. That pretty much wraps up the announcements for this week's stream. Okay, Mod Mike D. Some players might not recognize you. Can you give us a brief description of who you are and what you do for the Old School RuneScape team?
I'm Mike D. I am the product director of Old School RuneScape. I came on board about 7 months ago. I've been working in MMOs for about 20 years. I've worked on Dark Age Camelot and Warhammer Online, a whole bunch of MMOs going way back. I love MMOs, as I've mentioned many, many times before. Pretty much what my job here is I work with these guys. I'm like a vision partner with the team. I help them develop the vision, hone it down, and then, pretty much represent the product internally and externally. Make sure that, when we're going, because Jagex has other irons in the fire, you've got RuneScape, you've got all these other games. I'm like the representative to the other teams internally, as well as what we're doing now today.
I think for the players, the most comparable person is Mod Matt K. Like, this is essentially the like-for-like sort of job role that Matt K was doing. I think actually, though, that Mike D's job role is more senior than that of what Matt K's was. So,
I never got to meet the gentleman, but I've read a lot about him. People have been very verbose.
Mm-hmm. All right, okay. Kieren, I'm going to ask you to kind of reintroduce yourself, mainly because a lot of players know you as the awesome dev who gave us great PVM content like the Inferno, but you don't really do that so much anymore. So can you give the players some insight into what it is you do now?
All right, so, yes, I've had that full journey. I started at Jagex 5 years ago now. I just passed a 5-year anniversary a couple of weeks ago. I started all the way in QA, so I've been through a lot of different changes in my role to where I am today. So, yes, a lot of people know me for developing the Inferno, and especially PVM content in particular. And naturally, I've progressed a little bit up the chain, for lack of a better phrase. And now I'm the lead content developer. So, what does my role mean now? Well, firstly, I'm not actually coding, at least not very often. I'm not coding it directly myself anymore. I lead the team of content developers, designers in general. So all the way, all the different mods, Mod Ed, Mod Lenny, etc. I help manage and lead that team. I'm involved in recruitment for that team. I also do a lot of the training for that team. But in terms of content, how does that work? Well, with content, I'm helping to steer it. I'm working on the vision for what we do with content going forward. Generally, I'm looking further ahead. So, when it comes to something like leagues, I might have a lot of input into what leagues is, sort of what we're trying to achieve with it. I might help steer the direction, but then the team develops it. The team works on the design, fleshes it out, and builds it into what it is. While I'm thinking about what's coming next. I'm thinking a little bit further down the line. I've had a lot of conversations with Mike D about what we're doing in 2021 and even beyond that. So that's where my role comes in. So I'm helping to try and establish the level of quality we do with our content and such and like that. So I don't have the level of detail. I'm not dived into all the detail anymore where I'm developing the content myself, but it's on a higher level, basically. Hopefully try to explain roughly what my role is and what I'm doing. But yeah, it's more like I have a minor stamp on the content. Like, the team are the ones that are developing. The team are fantastic, but I'm giving advice, guidance, that kind of thing.
Mentor.
Yeah, mentoring is a good word, essentially. But I really do believe in my approach as a leader. I believe in empowering the team. The team are amazing. They're so close to the content. They're the ones working on it every single day. So my role is very much softly done, and ask the right questions, sow the right seeds of thought for the team to think about.
And we value you. Right. Okay. We frame this as a introduction to regular leadership live streams. Next question we've got is, what is a leadership team? What do they do, and what is it comprised of? So I've got a list of names I can run through at the end if you'd like. But if one of you would like to take what does a leadership team do, then do feel free.
Well, from the top down, right, you have the organization, you have Jagex, and there's, again, I don't know how far up your list goes. There's Jagex, and there's a guy that heads up the studio of all the different games underneath of it, games that exist, new games that are coming out, all that stuff. And each product, or for video game, for lack of a better term, so each product has an executive producer, and then generally they'll have like a product director and a marketing director, and community is in there. Like, there's a lot of different aspects to it. So like I said, I'm just one part of that, the product director. That we have a marketing director, we have an EP that you've met. I think he's been on one of the things before, but that's as far. And pretty much we try to develop again, now I'm talking like a go-to-market strategy. How do we take this thing and how do we get it in more people's hands? And it's all very, very boring stuff. Lots of decks. Lots of decks.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of covered it. So on my list, we've got Mod Bonsai, executive producer. Mod JLo is a project manager. We've got the two of you. Mod John C is a product manager. Mod Onion is the head of product marketing. Myself as lead community manager. An associate art director, QA manager. Mod Ash is the lead of the Juggernauts. Mod Rock is the lead of the operators. Mod Lenny is the lead of the Unknown. Mod Ed as the lead of the Wardens. And Mod Vagard as the engine lead as well. So all of us cumulatively, we tried to kind of provide guidance and direction, a lot of what Kieren was talking about, make the decisions for the product, but not in a kind of dictator way. We listen to the team, we provide that level of communication both up and down. So that's a bit of insight there. And I've seen some people in the chat are like, resident sleeper, organizational live stream. We just want to get this over and done with in the first one, to kind of introduce you to what we're trying to achieve with transparency, So then in future streams and future blogs and articles, it can be focused on what cool stuff's happening to the product.
Let me add to that, because we see a lot of people reflect the opinion that we trust the old school team, but we don't trust Jagex. We are Jagex, right? Like, I understand where it comes from, right? I've been a player, I've been very much seeing the journey, and it's, you know, a lot of people come to old school because they don't like the direction RuneScape went, they didn't like the MTX coming to RuneScape, they don't like the EOC, and that all happened, and they didn't feel the trust in Jagex because they didn't feel reflected. Everyone buys into what old school is. Truly, it really does come from the top. I promise it really does. Like, all the way up to the CEO, they buy into what we are doing with old school RuneScape. So, I mean, I can't, obviously, you have, there's a level where I cannot prove it to you. I cannot give you a piece of paper that says that directly, that this is the case. But honestly, that is the case, and we really are in sync. We talk to the leadership team of Jagex every single week about what we're doing with old school, helping to get input on where we're going with the product and such. So there isn't like there's some power struggle between Mike D and the head of Jagex where they're trying to force MTX into the game and Mike D's trying to stop it. That's not the case. We are all on the same page. I really do mean that.
I'm gonna get fired. Thanks, pal.
All right. Before we get into the questions, last thing for introductions, just how is everybody and what did you get up to the last week? So we'll start with you, Mod Mike D.
Oh boy. And now I got to make sure, you know, there's lots of super cool stuff that we're planning, right? Like part of my vision for this, and I put it in the Gazette, part of my vision is just to, you know, get this game in as many hands of everybody across the planet Earth, right? Like, again, provide you, the players, more value for what you are, you know, putting into it, and then get it in front of more and more and more people. That just is it's a winning combination as far as I'm concerned. So a lot of the stuff that I did this week was stuff to support that for the future. Again, here mentioned a little 2021, you know, what does that look like? How do we take, you know, how do we take all of your feedback, all of the stuff that the team has ideated, and how do we start working on what 2021 could look like?
Okay, Kieren,
I can't say
how are you?
more than I'll mess up and say something I'm not supposed to.
It's cool, Mike.
All
We've
right.
got future blogs and future streams to cover this kind of stuff. When we get to a point of when we can start talking about the cool stuff, that's what these kind of streams are for.
I just get in the habit of getting excited about something, and then I just blurt something out. And then, you know, and I have had this has been a thing throughout my entire career. So I'm desperately trying not to. I literally put on my on the laptop stuff not to talk about. Do not say these things. So.
Oh my god, RuneScape's coming to the Nokia 3310? No way! I couldn't believe it! What's the question? How am I?
How are you?
What are you up to? What have you been doing?
I'm excited because we've just, you know, we've having a lot of conversations about future projects right now, especially, you know, on the back of stopping Boss Laymaster right now. So lots of cool stuff to talk about. I'm excited to talk about it. That's where I am.
Sweet. What I've been up to, I've been on holiday. So I've been off since last Thursday, and I come back properly on Monday. But I dropped on by for the live stream and publishing the Gazette and stuff. So I'm good. Lots of walking, enjoying the sunshine. Looking forward to coming back and getting back into the mix of all the exciting goodness you guys mentioned. All right, let's get into the questions. First group of questions I got concerned the roadmap and the Gazette article. Big question for the first one is, why are clans and Group Ironman delayed?
I'll let Kier dig into the nitty gritty of it, but it's just looking at what we had. It's going to take longer than we thought it would. Correct?
That's the TLDR. I mean, naturally, we've been saying all the way through that clans is super technical. It's a challenge. It's hard to even understand and put a guess on it, right? That's ultimately where we are. And a lot of the work that Ash has been doing with Boku on it is impressive. It looks amazing. I love what's been done so far. But the reality of it is that kinks come up all the time, problems in the process. Naturally, there works quite a lot to it, and so we need to think about what do we do now, because if Clans isn't going to be out in the next few months, then what are we releasing? And that's why we've sort of come to where we are now. So We want to get it right as well, right? Clans is major. We've wanted to do it for 5 years. We really, really have. So, we're not going to just rush it and do it wrong. There's a lot of features people want. There's a lot of features that people look at the RuneScape clans and say, we need more than that. We absolutely want to do that. So
that does kind of take us into the next question, which is, in the Gazette, we mentioned that we're adding things like Boss Slayer Master, which was shelved. We're going to replace it with something else, maybe a fishing boss. The question is, if we removed those small and medium things, could we still get Group Ironman and clans out?
No. No is the short answer. The thing is, it's more related to the constant back and forth between tech work and content dev. There's also no guarantees on it. Reality is, all we're trying to do right now is try and be as transparent as possible as well. Like, naturally, this stuff happens all the time. We're just being a little bit more... You just said the words fishing boss. We haven't actually said what we're doing with fishing.
I'm going by my script here.
Why is fishing boss in the question? Everyone in the chat's just like, what? Fishing boss? Oh my goodness!
You know what? From
How
the
has
script,
that happened?
from the script, it could be a duplication of the word boss in Boss Slayer Master. Obviously, I've been on holiday for a week, so I've seen the script.
We just ran through this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ruined.
No, so this is about providing certainty on our schedule, getting some solid updates in, so that you guys have got something to play. It wouldn't be able to just be replaced by clans, because clans is coming from the tech team. A lot of it's driven by the tech team, and they just need a little bit more time to get through everything we need for it. So,
And I'd like to say that we want to put out, again, this is something that comes up quite often, right? Do we just put something out? We just put what we got out. Hey, could we cram this thing? But we want to do it right. Like I said, there's a lot of additional systems that we think would make for a really good clan system that we don't want to just make it a cut and paste version of this. We want to make it, our own thing. So we need the time.
everyone's like, Kieren looks like he hasn't slept for a year. This is lockdown life, dude. This is to get used to it. This is the challenge.
I've been working with this guy for months and months and months. Lockdown, he hasn't left that chair. He literally.
I live in this room. Also, I don't sound tired. I sound quite excited right now. So,
You always sound excited.
Just...
It's true.
You do. You do always sound excited.
But anyway, Boss Slayer Master Fuzzy, that has gone, right? We've pulled it. We know your feedback is there. There's a lot of points we feel like we can't address, right? Some of the things were like too much Slayer. Fundamentally, we cannot really address that with changes to the Boss Slayer Master. Secondly, the Slayer Helm problems, we didn't feel like we could get the problem solved. So that's why we want to shelve it, because it needs a bigger redesign. We'll revisit it if you guys want us to, and if we feel like we can deliver something solid that does address it. But that's obviously been replaced by something else. I do want to talk about that later. Is that coming up later in the script?
So,
do you know?
Yeah, man. The very next question is...
Okay, wonderful. Let's get into it.
Right, let me ask the question. We'll make it a Q&A rather than just lots of A's from Kieren. Right, we can see that Boss Slayer Master is shelved and that the team will look into something new, something more skilling focused. Could you give any insight and hints as to what the new focus might be and what led to Boss Slayer Master being shelved?
Shelving's a good reference, man. Like, that really does nail on the reference. But what led to being shelved? I just sort of said that.
I'm not saying any of this shit. You got.
Oh!
Oh!
Damn it.
Now you're fired.
Now I'm fired.
Wonderful. So what led to it being shelved? I sort of just said that. There's a lot of feedback we didn't feel like we could address, ultimately. It felt like we could pull it, it might pass still, but we didn't feel like we had listened to the feedback and taken it on board. There were things we had to address, and it wouldn't ever leave a lot of the player base feeling happy about it, even if it hit 75. So we want to take that back, so we've got time to readdress it if we go revisit it at a later date. In the meantime, what's the new focus? I do want to talk about it, so, as much as I've hinted about it, construction absolutely is where we're looking, right? Construction is a skill that needs some attention. Players have brought this up time and time again, particularly around the sort of ideas of doing some sort of alternative method to train construction that isn't just the build and remove thing. Normally, something akin to a system called construction contracts, something like that. So, that's very much where we're looking. We want to do something like that. We like the idea of an NPC having problems with his own house, and they need your help to come and fix it up. Maybe it's been in a lightning strike. Maybe they just want a nicer nicer set of drawers. This is where you come in, and you can help out. It's still being fleshed out design-wise, so this is just the high-level view right now. They're being worked on pretty rapid to try and turn this around and get this into a blog pretty darn soon. But ultimately, that's the sort of thinking. What we want to do, how I see it working, is ultimately slow XP rates, but a lot cheaper than regular con. So you get away from the build remove, which isn't pleasant as an experience in general, but you make a cheaper way to get players through some construction levels, but at a much slower rate. You know, regular construction is upwards of 700k XP an hour. There's a lot of room for something on the smaller end. So I'm excited about this. It also gives us some reward space to play with. So, you know, a lot of this is being worked out, so expect something more soon. But I did want to talk about it because I just want to get some gauge of a player opinion of what you're thinking about this sort of idea already. So
sounds good to me, man. I just want to point out as well that this type of stuff we've had in the backlog for quite a while now. If you just go on the likes of Reddit and even Twitter and search construction contracts and ignore the non-RuneScape stuff and focus on the RuneScape stuff, there are tons of player suggestions for it. 4 months ago, I'll drop a link in the chat, which is quite a cool proposal. Not to say we're going to copy it word for word or like for like, but just to kind of get you thinking about the type of content we want to introduce. Yeah, I just dropped the link in the chat there.
Yeah, this actually comes back to the other point of the Gazette as well. We talk about ideation and a lot of the ideas we've got. We already had construction contracts as a fairly well developed idea, and so it's naturally a good thing to go to as a swap in for Boss Slayermaster after we realised that we can't go forward with that. So I love the idea of, like, you know, there's so many dead houses in Varrock. There's so many dead locations where there's just buildings that serve no purpose. Feels like a really good place to be able to integrate something like this.
I like the idea of player-developed content, right? As much as we can get players involved in the design of it, makes tons of sense ahead of time. So
that's a question coming up. We'll get to that one very soon. Next up is, when can we expect Leagues 2? You know, League sits on the proposed roadmap. We've given a project update. Are we ready to start sharing release dates?
Well, I don't know. I don't know if I can. I'm looking right at it. Like, I'm literally looking at it, and I know exactly when it releases, but I don't think I can tell you, because then Wani and the rest of these marketing guys are going to climb up my back. So I'm trying to pay attention.
Right, I've got some info on this. So we've got Leagues news coming in August. That's when we'll start talking more about the content. Obviously, with Twisted League, we also went to the lengths of having a poll for the rewards. So we'll be doing the same stuff for Second League, including, you know, talking about what the name is going to be, talking about the theme next month. Okay, next up, I've got 2 questions directly in response to the Gazette we published. First one is, I think this is quite a worrying Gazette. I think it's weird you say there are several small and medium updates coming this year, but you don't mention what they are. Then you say all the stuff that's being delayed. It doesn't seem like there's anything tangible to look forward to this year. What is coming this year in the main game that we should look forward to? I get COVID is a thing, but it seems to have really slowed down updates. What causes the big delay at Jagex from working remotely that doesn't seem to affect other companies as much?
Well, I'll tell you this, right? I mentioned it before. We went from everybody was sitting in the studio, a lot of us, and then 9 days later, everybody was at home, right? So just getting everybody their machines and getting access and all these other things. Some people aren't even in the country anymore. We were all over the place, and getting everybody back on target and back on schedule actually has been, I would say it's been a big challenge. You know, like Zoom, right? I love talking to everybody at work, but, you know, you get this thing, it's like Zoom fatigue, right? I just don't want to log into Zoom for another 12 hours of Zoom conversations, right? So it does weigh on you eventually. So our velocity has definitely been impacted. No, I don't think it's all that bad. This COVID thing sucks.
I think
to add to it, just go on.
Okay, you go first.
All right, so to add to it, it's not just working from home. There's a pandemic going on. right? That's a mental toll on everyone. Everyone's worried about their own lives, let alone just not to go too dark on it, but there is a real situation where people are worried about their families and such, and it's mentally draining. It's not just working from home either. So there's a lot of things going on here. It's natural that things are going to be a little bit slower, and it's not just us. It truly is across the games industry, and it also varies by country as well. Some countries are a lot further down the line. Some countries are out of lockdown. In the UK, we're still, it's lightening, it's relaxing, but we're still all working from home. There's still basically a lockdown in place. So,
I think the medium and the small updates, though, I do want to say the medium and the small updates, that was more in response to, again, like Kieren was saying earlier, we look at this. We look at clans. Clans is, we have to have clans for Group Ironman. We have all these things, and then we're not going to be able to get this done because of like the back and forth of the tech, right? That's just time consuming. We wanted to put our best foot forward, so we do have some time in between. We want to deliver content to the players. I can't even mention how many players have come into the game because of COVID. Like Kieren said, people coming home to old school because it's a place that makes them feel good. It makes them feel comfortable. It's not. It's not as scary a place as everything else. And we want to make sure that we are tackling things, that we're providing things for those players as well. People who just came back, people who are trying to get back into it again. And that's really a lot of the small and medium updates target those things, but also provide content for our players that have been playing the whole time.
Yeah, I think the other part of the question is, why haven't you said what these small and medium updates are? Well, the next Gazette will sum them all up. In the meantime, obviously, we are developing them. We're designing them mostly. We're also going to be blocking some of them over the course of the next month or two. So you will see them, but we need to present them and give them their own space to make sure we can have proper discussions around them, that we concrete on a lot of the design details before we go forward. So, I've mentioned the fact we're going to do something with construction. We almost spoiled the fact we're going to do something with fishing. So we're looking to do a fishing skill boss of some kind. So we're looking at, because fishing lacks diversity, especially in the middle of the skill. So that's why we're going to look to do something. So yeah, I mean, those are two examples, but obviously there are more coming as well and such. So exciting things to look forward to. The thing is as well, we've also lacked RuneFest. So we lack the big stage to go on and announce all these big things. So naturally it feels a little bit different with the way we're having to do it.
Yeah, I'm seeing in the chat saying it was quite a ridiculous question. Basically, because of the how the players insinuating that we've been bad, we've adapted poorly to a situation. But I think the main thing I wanted addressed is the fact that it might be hard for players to get excited about content. They don't know what the content is, and the content they were excited about isn't coming till next year. So I think that's a really valid part of a question. And I want to ask the question in its entirety, because if I don't, and I just take the good bits from it, then I'll look like I'm shying away from tough stuff. But just before we move on to the next question, the last bit, which is, what causes the delay at Jagex, which doesn't seem to affect other studios and other companies, I think is, I don't want to be completely black and white, but I think that's just quite a false statement. Every other game and studio, particularly MMOs, have had their roadmaps just completely dashed. Destiny announced theirs, a few weeks ago, and within a few weeks, they've said actually it's coming out 3 months later because of COVID and working from home. Final Fantasy 14 are releasing their big patch in August. That was meant to come in June, and I could go through like a whole list of delays for the rest of the industry. But just like every other company in the world, we're adapting. I personally think Jagex have been great. We've got everyone set up remotely within weeks, and then to the point where last week we were talking about all the goodies boxes we were getting sent, like all the snacks and books of Sudoku and that kind of stuff too. So it's a great place to be working at the moment. I feel really fortunate. Okay, the last question we've got in relating to the roadmap and the Gazette talks about ideation specifically. Mike, you kind of touched upon this earlier. So the question is, could there be opportunities for players to put forth detailed design documents to pitch an idea? You often see the graphically appealing ideas appear at the front page of Reddit, but they aren't necessarily well designed or well thought out. You really do need an in-depth design document to be able to pitch a good idea, and it's less likely something like that would get upvoted. How do you both feel about that?
I'd like to see us get more involved in more, let's say, tactile is not the right word at this point, but getting in front of players, getting in the room with them, well, the virtual room, more than just a message on Reddit, more than just even a document. Have a conversation, right? Like, we're all partners in this, right? The players and the devs, and we're all partners in it. And the idea, even the one you shared, right? That's a solid idea. There's a lot of really good mechanical ideas to that. So I think I would like to see us get even more open with it, more involved with players in the community in that regard.
I would love to fully design something on a stream. I want to get like a big whiteboard on stream and, even go to that level of just purely working out a piece of content. Like something we'd generally probably do in the office, but do it public with the players. I think that's cool. But I also do think, coming back to PDCs, player design content, the stuff that led to Motherload Mine, Rooftops, it's been a long time. It's been a long time since we did that. And I think I would love to bring that back next year, personally, if we can. Because I think that's a really good way to go. And that encourages people to be more in depth, because we're asking for submissions that come to us directly, and we're filtering through them. It doesn't rely on people to upvote them on social media, because obviously something that's 5,000 words is a lot harder to read than something that's a nice, pretty image. Of course, naturally it is. But we do already, obviously, do get some good ideas through Reddit and the community. But yet, it's not always Reddit either. There's, we get them from everywhere. And in fact, I've seen groups of players put really detailed designs together with concept art and everything. So, people have gone quite far already. So we do take it, and a lot of the ideas generally do come from the community as is. But I do believe it would be good to do a more formal competition again.
Yeah, I definitely want to be introducing ideas from the players, and also using the players more to validate the stuff we've got. So we've started using this Gazette to talk about some of the ideas from ideation, but it'd be nicer if we had almost like another level to that, which is, we've presented really top level stuff to players, cool. It'd be great to be able to talk more privately with larger groups of players in a bit more detail. Now, we were planning on doing that, but COVID hit, so we had agreed something like quite a significant budget to get players into the studio across the course of a year, playtesting stuff and giving feedback on designs and inviting them to do the same. But we haven't really replaced that with anything since lockdown. And I feel like maybe Boss Slayer Master is a prime example of why we need that bit of contact. So if we can think of a method to do that virtually, that is also private, because with virtual come more risks, more leaks, that kind of stuff, then we absolutely should be pursuing that. Because had we proposed Boss Slayer Master to a smaller group of players first, we would have seen how the community felt. And it's not necessarily that they're vehemently opposed to the content we were pitching, but more about, okay, I don't mind this type of idea, but there's been so much Slayer and combat, let's have some skill stuff instead. They'd have told us that way before, and when we could have focused on bringing the skilling stuff forward. I'm not sure what the solution to that is, I think the solution is just accept that there might be leaks and prepare to if something is leaked, prepare to post publicly almost instantly. Say, yeah, you know what, that leak happened. Here is what we showed.
I think so. I think it's fine, because we're going through it not to spoil content. We're going through it to get solid feedback on what we're doing and ideas that we might pitch to the community later down the line. So I think that's fine, personally.
Right, let's take some questions from the chat. We're just over halfway through, so take some questions from the chat and then we'll move on to the rest of the questions we got when we asked earlier in the week. Cynthia asks how my cat is doing. So last week I said that we had to take Mimi to the vet. She's fine. The vet has said there's nothing wrong whatsoever. So a couple $100 down to be told that she is a perfectly fine cat. So that's good. DVD Uwu asks, where's Modash been? Modash is still there. He is still working. His internet isn't great, which is why he's not on the live stream, unfortunately. But just earlier, we had a discussion, like, I'm sure as a studio, we could afford to get him better internet, maybe like some 4G installed so he can join us on live streams. I know the players miss him a lot. Next question is from Peng Dude, also asking about Modash, saying, why isn't Modash on the leadership team? He's the leader of the Juggernauts dev team. I ran through the list of who's who quite quickly as well. But if you go back to May's Gillenor Gazette, you have a pretty thorough breakdown of the leadership team. Okay, Kieren, I'm going to come to you for the next question. Burntfish44 asks, why are the concerns about boss crowding and the Slayer Helm prevalence being dismissed regarding the new Slayer Master?
Why are they being dismissed?
Yeah, so I'm assuming,
okay.
well, I mean, bear in mind, only 90 minutes ago or so that we confirmed that Boss Slayer Master was being shelved. So
that's absolutely part of. It's absolutely part of why we changed the content and shelved it, basically, because we couldn't properly address that feedback. Like, we tried to explain what we thought it would do. We thought it would have an impact on it. It would make overcrowding slightly worse, but we didn't think it would be game-changing to it. We didn't think it would cause catastrophic consequences. That's what we tried to explain. But ultimately, we know it's a problem, and hence why we've made this decision.
Sweet, sounds good. So to answer the question, yeah, we have listened and we have addressed it. Right, next up, I'm coming to you, Mod Mike D. Seems to be your forte. So Gamer 24/7 all day asks, do you guys think you'll ever add any more free quests, small or big, in the future? I feel like this would help you guys grow.
That's a great idea. Yes, as a matter of fact, I'm 110% behind the idea of doing that. And we've had discussions many, many times about how we can do it. The issue is, we want to make sure that we're always keeping our current players, our current members, our current family, if you will, in mind, right? We want to make sure that we're not pushing stuff down. We want to make sure that we're additive, right? We want to add cool things for new players to do, but we don't want to take away from that. We're curators of this world. We need to make sure that we're not, we got to make sure we don't mess it up, do no harm, and then we're going to try to do these additive things that we can help new players understand without making it easy.
Sounds good to me. Next question is, do you hire remotely, i.e. people in the US? I'm assuming they're asking because you're here speaking to us.
I was sitting there for months and months and months, and then I just, you know what I mean? COVID-19 went sideways, and I was like, I'm going to go visit my family. And my boss, who you mentioned earlier, Rob, was like, yeah. We'll see you back in 3 weeks. And that was like 12 weeks ago. So, no, we don't necessarily, but, I'm looking forward to the time when all this settles down, and then I can actually go back to my apartment where all my stuff is.
Yeah, so I guess for the sake of anyone thinking of applying, we don't hire remotely currently. The expectation is that you do work in the UK, in Cambridge, at Jagex Game Studio. Obviously, we've hired new people since, and people have been caught abroad, like you were, Mike. So they are having to work remotely. But that isn't the norm. I understand the HR team are kind of reviewing our process and seeing, could we work remotely permanently after this is over with? They're still reviewing it. But for the time being, the answer is no. We don't hire remotely. The expectation is you do come to Cambridge. Cool. Mike, a question for you again. It says, hey, Mike, nice to meet you. What's your favorite quest and why?
I don't do much questing. I kind of just grind. I'm just grinding away right now. As a matter of fact, every time we talk about a new skill, which we've talked about many new skills, not just fishing, I kind of get into them. And so I would say my favorite quest so far has been the first quest I did, which is the cook's assistant.
Right.
That really set my table for what I was going to be running into quest-wise for the rest of the game. But like I said, I don't quest very much. My plan is get in and then just go after capes until I'm done. I like to be overpowered for the stuff that I'm doing. That's just my MMO experience.
Mike decided to spend his first bunch of hours getting agility up and spent his whole career on Earl doing agility laps.
I got magic up pretty high. I got agility up pretty high. Fishing I just finished. Well, not finished, but or before I had to stop because it's getting prohibitively expensive. But anyway, I'm just a noob. Take it easy on me.
All right, let's move on to the questions we got earlier in the week. Plus Literature 7 asks, what's your vision of a new skill and polls in general moving forward? From virtually every community-run poll we've seen, there's overwhelming support for a new skill, but every attempt to actually introduce one has failed, despite new skills being core to the RuneScape experience.
I don't want to dismiss ever trying to do a skill again. That's certainly not where we're at, because it absolutely gets support. And we see that support on the annual survey we do as well. Naturally, it's split. And I think where there's more split is, if we do want a skill, which skill is it? That's the difficult area. What we've learned from the way skills we've done is that we cannot do it in the way that we have, where we just go behind the scenes, try and design a skill, then pitch it. Doesn't work. We need to do it with the community if we're going to approach a skill again, and directly in the community. We'll talk with you all along the way if we go forward with that. That's what my belief is. That's not to say we'll ever get a skill through a poll. It's not to say we'll ever actually end up delivering a skill. But if we do approach it again, that's how I think we have to do it. But yeah, naturally it's difficult.
I mean, we asked the question in the annual survey, are you even interested in a new skill? Because I feel like in previous times where we've offered sailing, artisan, and warding, we kind of missed the first step, which is, do you want a new skill? And if there isn't a solid amount of people saying yes to that question, then there's probably no point progressing with other ideas. Because if you're not going to get 75% of players saying, yeah, I'm open to a new skill, then you're not going to get 75% of players saying yes to a specific skill that we work on in a big design document like we did with warding, for example. So we're still waiting for the annual survey results to come back. I imagine that will guide our choices. We kind of mentioned earlier, we're getting into the nitty-gritty of what 2021 and beyond looks like. So the annual survey probably go a long way to shaping what that is. Cool. Next question from Samstar. I'm quite happy to take this one. Is there going to be an online equivalent of RuneFest this year? Any ideas when it will be? So it still hasn't been totally finalized, but it's looking very unlikely there'll be an online RuneFest, particularly the RuneFest that you know or would come to expect. If we think about what makes RuneFest as a physical event special, the content reveals is a massive part of it. And like we said, we're still looking at our roadmap for the rest of this year and the next year. We've had to, push 3 of the things we announced at last year's RuneFest have now fallen into 2021. So it doesn't really make much sense to have a virtual event when we're not ready to be able to talk about content that is coming and when we can introduce it to you. But we are having discussions about other things which RuneFest comes with, so like the Golden Gnome Awards, or can we try and recreate the player meets JMod experience virtually? So it might not be a RuneFest, it could just be bits and pieces from RuneFest in a virtual environment. We're still trying to kind of work out what that might look like. We want to do stuff, definitely, but just an online RuneFest branded that way won't happen. Okay, next question. This one will go to both of you. Let's start with Mike first. RS asks, what are your long-term goals for the game, and what would you like to see more? New areas, raids, skills?
I'll tell you mine from the product side, right? We talked about this. Kieren can tackle, from the product side, I want to see more people play this game, right? Like that is the easiest way. We talk about, and again, I don't think it's a bad word, but MTX, right? We're never ever going to do MTX. That's just a fact of life. So the way that we can provide value to the company Jagex is by getting more players to play the game, right? And then so getting it on different. I'm in a real sweet spot right here. I got to make sure that how we get it in more players' hands, in more regions, all over the world. And that's the honest to God truth. Like, I want to see it everywhere. I want to see, because people just don't know all the cool things that go on in this game. It takes some time to get, used to it. It's only localized in English, right? It's not culturalized anywhere, right? So, I think it'd be really cool to get this in a lot of players' hands. So that's my vision to see the game grow, right? We have plans things we want to do, things we want to make it, to your point about the questing earlier, you know, what other things can we do where we don't necessarily impinge upon the game, but we can also produce more stuff for more players. And we have increased our hiring this year, and have a roadmap for hiring even into next year to really beef up the size of the team to deliver more content to everyone. So that's my vision for it. I also like to see a new skill. I have some ideas of the ones I would like, but we'll talk about those here.
Add to that, you talk about the team size growing. I think if we get the team, if we grow the team as we expect to do next year, I think at the end of 2021, the team will probably be about twice as big as it was at the start of this year. Like, that's ridiculous. That's a huge growth for the team, so that we can properly deliver stuff that we're trying to do. Like, it's definitely the one area we fell short, is being able to offer enough diverse content to appease like all the different types of player. Like, some people want more raids, some people want quests, some people want PvP content, and we can only handle one massive project at a time. Something like Darkmire, it takes months and months of development for one full team. Same with raids, the same with all these big things that we've done the last few years. So it's so hard to do that for multiple different pieces of the game. Like, it's so difficult. This team will let us do that and address the problems in the game and help support this growth of, you know, that Mike alludes to. So, what content? I think naturally we continue doing a lot of the same stuff we've been doing, right? It's the stuff you love, it's the stuff you expect. New areas, Zaya's not finished. There's huge new expansions for Zaya to come. We've talked about a lot of this as well, like Menethos, unfinished. Even the Vampire series, unfinished in the quest line. New raids, absolutely. We're obviously going to do a new raid at some point in our future. Skills, we've just talked about that as well. Naturally, there's a lot of improvements to make to the game as well. Be it construction contracts, be it the farming guild, a new guild for another skill, improvements to existing guilds. We all know the crafting guild is Bar of the Bank is not very good. The cooking guild doesn't really do much for you. The range guild is even more useless than that. So, like, there's lots of the games that are dead content that can be fixed, as well as these new expansions. So that's our core content. But I also want to continue to be ambitious and diversify what we do. We've done leagues, we've done Deadman. Like, I think some of the most successful things we've ever done in this game have been the things that have been more experimental. Deadman was like nothing we'd ever done. Like, and yet it was huge. It was huge, especially towards the earlier days of Deadman. Leagues, again, that was a huge success last year. It's offered something new that we can keep on doing. I can't wait to talk about Leagues too, because I think it's really, really exciting. And I really think Leagues is going to be a good part of the game going forward through the next few years as well. Spin the game on its head, have a completely different experience. And especially because that allows us to do that while we can't do that in the main game, right? Old school is old school, and it's got to stick true to that. Leagues lets us play with it in different ways. But also, new types of content. Add new arms to what we can do. And I really get excited about the concept of doing some sort of roguelike gameplay in old school RuneScape. I think it's an obvious way to potentially go. And so I've had a lot of discussions about this, and, you know, this seed has been in my mind for years. But I've had conversations with different people. Aiza had some really good thoughts about this, and I love this sort of idea. I've spoken to other people in the team, and obviously, and it's not dungeoneering. I'm just going to say that straight up at the bat, because obviously dungeoneering was an attempt at doing that sort of gameplay, but it doesn't quite hit on where I'm thinking with this. Imagine more like a traditional roguelike, but in old school. That's the sort of thing I want to think about. It's ambitious, it's experimental, so I can't exactly give you a pitch right now of what that would look like in old school, but I want to find room for that in terms of what we do with content, to offer something new and different. Give new ways to play the game that really are new experiences. Because players have played this game for years. A lot of you in this chat, I guarantee, if all say the year of when you first discovered old school or RuneScape. I guarantee a lot of you are all going to be like 2005, 2006, 2007. Like, so many of you, you've played this game for a long time. Let's give you something new. I think Leagues does that. I think something like a roguelike dungeon system would. What about if you could create your own dungeon? What if we give you basic systems where you can say, wait, we don't give you, obviously you can't script the game, but imagine you could map your own dungeon out and have other players do it. You can have certain monsters, you can place them in the map. You can even choose from a few mechanics that these monsters do. That's the sort of where my head's at, trying to think like, how can we actually make something that's really, really cool and ambitious? We've got the POH dungeon, but that is not the same scale as what I'm thinking. Imagine Super Mario Maker crossed with making a roguelike sort of dungeon in RuneScape and having other players take on your dungeon challenge and complete it. I'm thinking outside the box, and that's where I'm at, right? We haven't got a design, we haven't got anything there yet. But this is what ideation is about. This is why we're putting time into spending time thinking about the future of content. And that's on top of all the stuff you've come to know and love already. So that's where I'm trying to think about. Now, that's not going to say there's going to be something next year. It's not going to be say there's something in 2022 either, because this stuff takes time. But these are just seeds of thought that we're going through at the minute. So anyway, end of speech.
Should be
that was a
inspiration.
rant.
Yeah, man, that was a long one. It was good. I've had some people from the chat. So this is some of the questions coming in response to Mike's vision for getting this game growing. Stuff touching upon have you considered making the game accessible for consoles, smart TVs, Steam, etc.? What are you doing about bots? What are you doing about the game client and stuff? I think we're kind of aware of all these gripes and also all these opportunities as well. What we want to be able to do is use this live stream, like the monthly live stream in which we bring Mike in front of the player base, as well as other leads from around the team as well. Use the new regular feature in Gazette to talk about these types of stuff. Talk about any major product initiatives, talk about tech initiatives. But obviously, we can only talk about and announce stuff when it's ready. But we want to encourage this platform for you to ask these types of questions.
I think it's fair to say that us getting the size of this team, right? It's not all, you can't just throw devs at it, right? You can't be like, we're going to hire 15 new devs, right? The QA, you need QA to support each dev team. You need, let's say we had 250,000 new players come into the game. Let's say we had 500,000 new players come into the game. Let's say that just happened. That stretches a lot of resources, right, and puts a fine point on it. So we've seen it. We've been able to work that into our roadmap, and so there will be improvements and upgrades across the entire organization to support this vision of growth, right? Because you need more customer service. You need better security. You need all these things based on that, and then we have budgeted for that in the coming up year. And that's all been put in front of executives. And again, like Kieren said, that stuff's already signed. Like, we're already looking, right? So we're in a good place.
Sure, and there's the stuff in the works. You mentioned it's all been budgeted for. Things are moving along, but it takes time to get to a point where we're ready to be announcing and discussing a bit more widely. Okay, right, we've got just under 10 minutes left. I've got a few questions I'd like to go through that seem quite fitting for this type of leadership live stream. Spindle Julix asks, given the state of some unintended consequences and updates and rollbacks in the past, do you think you'll ever implement test worlds for players to playtest content and then report issues there?
I'll answer this because RuneScape has beta worlds. They use them occasionally for content, but it's not used for every launch. I would love them for old school in general, because then we can use them whenever we want, especially complex updates. Imagine the dev system, humongous change to the game. Not only do we want to make sure it's not going to screw you over on launch with a bug, we want your feedback on it. Beta servers really help us do that. So I'd love to have that in place. Naturally, it's work to do that, but I'd very much want it. Same for skill. A lot of, when we were talking about polling warding, people would love it to have at least part of it, like the core concept, on a beta world where they can go and play with it before they vote on it. I think this stuff's great. But second to that, obviously, the point of the question was testing content, making sure it's bug-free. I think it's a natural thing that we should consider. There's no guarantees, there's no dates on this. It's just, we like the idea. We've not been able to plan it and go forward with it yet, but I think it's a smart thing to do.
Okay, next question from RNG Reed. How much input does the rest of the team have on another team member's project once it's approved? For example, are there any quality or consistency assessments by other team members?
I mean, I'll let dive into the depths of that, but I mean, these projects, I think everybody has feedback into it, the entire team, right? Again, and the amount of oversight is pretty stringent, I would think, at least in my experience and seeing the ones that we've done most recently for our newest hires.
Yeah, there's a lot of input from everybody in the team. Like, whenever a design's being done, yes, it'll be done by a specific team, development team, but every development team's looking at it. The whole team's seeing everything that's being done every 2 weeks. We're reviewing it constantly. It is not just this person's wrote a thing and is releasing it. The short answer to the question is yes, ultimately.
I think it's also worth pointing out that, you know, we're all gamers. Sometimes we disagree with some of the content, which is cool. We have those kind of discussions. But we're very fortunate in that we are a community-driven game. So we might have a disagreement on how content should be proposed. Perhaps we'll reach some kind of compromise, perhaps not. But we can always say, let's let the players decide, whether in blog form or in poll form as well. And then if let's say 2 people in the team disagree, like Mod A and Mod B, we go ahead and poll or blog with Mod A's proposal. Players aren't quite keen on it, well, we can revisit it, and that's when Mod B gets to say, okay, let's try my proposal now. So we disagree sometimes, and I think that's fine. I think those disagreements end up making for the best gameplay at the end of it, through those kind of compromises and being able to see perspective. Like we've got max players in the team, we've got BVMers in the team, we've got Ironman in the team, Pures in the team. So all of these different perspectives allow us to share our own insights as players as well, to kind of create that content.
There are often heated debates, like people care about even the minute details when they're being discussed all the time. So,
okay, next question. Kieren, probably going to look for you here, considering Mike's time in the team. Big fan of RuneScape, which is a nice name. Asks, how did Matt K leaving the team affect old school structure? He was one of the anchors that we, the community, look to.
Matt K leaving came at a time where the leadership structure of old school was getting put in place properly, I'd say. Like, the team was it's a level of ambition that changed, I think, with where the product team sits, right? So, around that sort of era, we started hiring a lot of different leadership roles, such as Mike D coming in, such as Mud Bonsai coming in, a new marketing manager, all these different positions. So that old school had the support it needed. That isn't why Matt K left, it's not really part of the same conversation there, but it was just happening at the same sort of time frame. So, but naturally it was a good point to do it with Matt K leaving. Matt K basically led the team, like, as an individual, which obviously wasn't viable long term with one person. It had to expand. And now we've got that position in place. So now we can support the team growing. And hence, you know, the last couple of years of more and more people coming into the team, that's really what changed. Beyond that, it hasn't really affected much. The teams operate in much the same way they always have. We've just got more teams, more support from the rest of the company, more support from leaders who can help lead the team. That's ultimately it. I don't think there's anything else to add. I don't know if you've got something to say, Sween.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of covered the main points of what's changed in that we're now better positioned to grow the team and grow and onboard new people and such. I do think, and I think it's unrelated, I think this would have happened anyway, in terms of what's changed in the structure since he's left. The way the teams are set up and formalized, and, you know, scrums are properly in place, and we're having the formalized sprint reviews and stuff. I think processes are way stronger than they were. I think that would happen anyway, but that's just, you know, what's changed since then. And to the end point of, you know, he was one of the anchors of the community we look to, completely agree, which is why we want to bring this live stream. Get you to meet the leadership team. You know kind of who's accountable for the product, the game, if you want to avoid like the corporate term for it, and also give you that kind of regular article in the Gazette, which is this what's happening in the game as well. So since Matt left, there has been a big gulf in, the leaders of the game to look forward to. If you look at other games as well, like Final Fantasy XIV, you kind of know who pulls the strings there. You look at World of Warcraft, you know who heads up the studio, that kind of stuff. I don't think old school players have had that figurehead to be able to look to, or answers to the really big important questions, which is what we want to try and what we're trying to do with this.
Naturally, I'd add to that, just in saying that, Matt K was there from day one. He helped to build what we have now, and obviously the whole aspect of the polling, the Q&As on stream every week are quite unique to this product. Polling especially. Other games will do live streams, but certainly not to the extent that we're doing. So it's actually, feel free to comment, Mike, as well, but for people who are coming in, it's not usual that you're going to be doing Q&As every week with the community and such, and in the same manner. So, it's new. It's going to take someone like Mike time to get to grips with how we do things and to integrate as well. But I think it is really important. We do have that figurehead that the community can look to.
Well, I think coming into the game, again, with a fresh set of eyes, I could easily and instantly see that polling is a pillar of this game. It needs to exist, right? Players need this ability to be involved, right? It is unlike any other game in that regard that I've ever been involved with. And I want to see if we can do more than that, right? That's hence what I was saying is build, groups of players that we can go to in all these different thematic portions of the game, like get more involved, right? That's what the player wants. You want to be involved. You want a sense of ownership. You want a sense of belonging. You want this is your thing too. So I want to see us do more of that. And how can we accomplish that in the future?
Sweet. Right. That kind of brings us to the end of the hour. This flew by. Lots of questions I'd like to carry on asking, but we'll save those for the next stream we've got. So just to kind of reiterate what this is, we're looking at monthly, we don't have like a fancy name for it, but a leadership live stream. We'll introduce you to the other leaders of the team, most of which you know already, accompanied with the Gazette having an article talking about what's going to happen with the game, just to kind of increase that level of transparency with the players. We're pretty good at weekly streams. Even remotely, we have a Q&A every single week, but we're focusing on game content, which is great. You need to have those kind of questions and answers. But if you want to look beyond the game and talk more about the game's future and products and what's going to happen, what are you going to do about these big gripes we've got as a player base? We mentioned stuff like client, account security, botting, and so on. These are the kind of formats we want to elevate, so you know where to go to ask those questions and get those answered. Right, I'm going to round us up with some announcements. So if you just joined us, !Gazette in the chat to be given a link to July's version of the Gielinor Gazette. That is 1Z and 2 Ts. The type of stuff we cover, there's a lot of it, so it's a lengthy read. Give yourself like half an hour or so to get through it all. It's the first. It contains the first in a new monthly feature in which we talk about the old school leadership team. A message from Mike D. We've also examined our roadmap closely for the second half of the year, and we're making some changes. So the key things you need to know. It doesn't sound positive, but I promise we'll make it positive. Kingdom Divided, Plans, and Group Ironman are being pushed back to 2021. We're going to be replacing that content with smaller and medium updates in the meantime. And we're still going to be working on things like Clans and Group Ironman in the background, getting that technical work done, getting the grounding for it in place. We introduce you to 2 new content devs and 1 new engine developer, which takes us to a total of 6 new developer hires, even in the time we're in lockdown. And we've also confirmed the hiring of a new community manager and a new artist, which we'll introduce you to soon. Lost Slayer Master has been shelved in light of player feedback. We're going to revisit it at a later date, redesign the content. Instead, we're going to replace it with some skilling content that we've been planning for later on, which Kieren talked about at the start of the stream. Construction. It's going to be construction focused. So I'd recommend pulling yourself back to the beginning of the stream to hear all about that. Bounty Hunter and Rev Cave changes are confirmed to come on 6th of August, is what we're aiming for. There's a very thorough proposal from Modash for a costume room rework, which we hope to pull really soon. And finally, we kind of explore a lot of the team's ideas from Radiation Days, which is just the team's platform to design and prototype content we'd like to see in game. What we're trying to do is share the results of those so we can get a really early indication of, oh, we should proceed with this, design it out and flesh it a bit further. So we want to give you those top level ideas so we can decide whether or not we want to flesh it out and come back to you with even more design for those content. I think that's about it. Would either of you like to say anything before we end?
Thanks for listening. thanks for watching. Exciting things coming up with the new blogs and such. So expect them soon. Like, I'm excited for you to read them and get your feedback.
I'm looking forward to it as well.
Big news coming soon. So for next month's Gazette, we kind of know what we want to talk about, which is, we mentioned on this today, we're looking at the rest of the roadmap for the second half of the year. By next month's Gazette, we want to give you the roadmap. This is what we're going to be polling. This is what we want to be deving and releasing. Beyond that, so like let's look at September and October. We've got some ideas for the things we want to talk about. Less content focused and more tech focused. We're not really in a position to be talking about it just yet, but by then we should be. So let's call it a day. Thank you very much for joining me, Mod Mike D and Mod Kieren, Mod Spear behind the scenes, and Mod Acorn on the chat. And a big thank you to everybody for sticking around and watching us for the last hour. We'll see you next week. See ya.
Thanks.